Viewing our beautiful blue planet from above was an eye-opening privilege. I still recall my first view of Earth from space. I was aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia about 10 minutes into the flight, and looking out a window I saw the Atlantic Ocean with sunlight shimmering off its blue surface. Beyond the ocean was the curve of the Earth's horizon, and beyond the horizon was a vast expanse of empty black space. The sight sent a chill up my spine, a sight that I have never forgotten. By gazing down on Earth, I gained a deeper appreciation for how all parts of land, water, ocean, and atmosphere are interconnected and interdependent. I better understand today how the choices we make, big or small, can impact the well-being of our planet and all of its people. Preventing further environmental degradation and improving the health of natural ecosystems has become a fervent concern of mine. Riparian zones, the banks and wetland areas near a river, stream, or lake, play a significant role in the natural ecosystems that support the health of people and the planet. These zones include the water-loving vegetation that connects land and water, the vegetation near rivers and lakes that purifies and filters our water, that moderates the effects of floods and droughts, that reduces erosion and supports a wealth of biodiversity. We can learn much more about riparian areas by viewing them from above. Satellite imagery, for instance, reveals the state of habitats over wide expanses, something that is impossible to appreciate solely by standing on the banks of a stream and gazing about. Studying riparian areas across an entire watershed enables us to understand the big picture. Identification of riparian areas under stress becomes possible, and decisions that we make regarding the restoration of the most vulnerable areas become more informed.
Riparian areas are that interface between land and water. They are transition zones or a buffer zone, a last line of defense, essentially, between the actions that we're taking on the land and what is happening in our water.
We have an enormous amount of riparian shoreline in the province of Alberta. Rough estimate of the length of riparian shoreline is about 1.5 million kilometers. And when you put that in the context of the circumference of the Earth, the amount of riparian shoreline that we have in Alberta goes around the Earth approximately 31 times.
A watershed is what captures water from this broader landscape and brings it to a center point like a river or a creek or a lake. So as water is traveling across the landscape, it's picking up nutrients and sediments and contaminants and depositing those into the water body. And so this riparian area is kind of the last stopping place between the landscape and the water bodies.
Riparian areas fit into the larger scheme of environmental management because they provide really important ecosystem services to human communities. So one really important ecosystem service that riparian areas provide are things like water quality improvement. Riparian vegetation is really important for filtering out things like sediments and nutrients. And sediments are really detrimental to aquatic habitats. They can negatively affect fish and fish spawning. And so riparian vegetation does a really good job of filtering out those sediments. Riparian vegetation is also really important from the perspective of mitigating risk associated with flooding.
Watershed management tells us that we can't manage any one aspect of the landscape in isolation. Riparian areas are connected to the lands around them, to the watershed as a whole. And so we need to look at that whole system together to really make sure we're protecting the health of that entire system.
I think having data acts as a catalyst for understanding where we are and where we want to be. Satellite imagery has been a game changer because it lets us see the Earth differently. It gives us a perspective on habitats and vegetation that we don't get when we're on the ground. It would take us a lifetime to measure and assess all of the riparian areas. And now that we have access to satellite imagery, we're now able to look at the condition and the change in condition of things like vegetation at scales as big as river watersheds.
We want people to be able to find their place in the watershed, to look into what riparian health might look like in places that matter to them, and maybe think about what they could do, what actions they could take to help improve or restore riparian areas in those places that matter the most to them.
The view from above enhances our insights. Following spaceflight, I emphasize to one and all that Earth is humanity's precious and only home, the only planet in our system, perhaps in the entire universe, that sustains intelligent life. We must protect it. Let's invest in research and protection of our riparian areas. They play an important role in natural ecosystems and will help sustain the well-being of future generations.